Jake Morrison sat in the back row of the advanced xenobiology classroom, trying to make himself as small as possible. The chair was built for creatures much larger than humans, and his feet barely touched the floor. Around him, students from dozens of different worlds listened as Professor Thexan explained the mysteries of planetary science. The professor was a Velkari, tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the classroom lights. His large black eyes moved across the room as he spoke, taking in every detail. The Velkari were known for their intelligence and their ability to read minds, though Professor Thexan was polite enough to stay out of his students' thoughts during class. "Today we will discuss planetary classification," the professor said in his soft, musical voice. "Every world in our galaxy falls into one of 7 categories based on its ability to support life." Jake glanced around at his classmates. To his left sat Zara, a Silthan whose body looked like it was made of living crystal. When she moved, tiny musical notes filled the air. Her people could connect their minds directly to computers and solve math problems faster than any machine. Behind her was Crix, an Aquarian with long tentacles instead of arms. He wore a special breathing mask filled with the purple gas his people needed to survive. The Aquarians could think about 12 different things at the same time without getting confused. Then there were the other humans. Lisa Chen sat 3 rows ahead taking careful notes. She was one of the smartest students in their year and always knew the right answers. Near the front, Danny Williams was trying to stay awake. He had stayed up too late again working on his engineering project. Humans were well liked at the Galactic Academy. They got along with everyone and could learn almost anything if they worked hard enough. But they were not special like the other species. They could not read minds like the Velkari, or think like computers like the Silthan, or breathe underwater like the Aquarians. They were just normal. Professor Thexan waved his hand and a huge display appeared in the air above his desk. It showed a beautiful green and blue planet with white clouds swirling around it. "This is Zentori Prime, our host world," he said. "It is a Class A planet. Perfect temperature, clean air, gentle weather, and peaceful plant-eating animals. Most civilized worlds are Class A or Class B." The display changed to show other planets. Some were covered in ice, others were burning hot deserts, and a few looked like nothing but rock and metal. Class C planets are too cold or too hot for most life. Class D worlds have dangerous weather. Class E planets have poisonous air or water. The professor's voice grew more serious. Class F worlds are what we call harsh worlds. They can support life, but it is difficult and dangerous. Jake found himself paying closer attention. Something about this felt important, though he was not sure why. Then we have Class G worlds, which we call hostile worlds. These planets actively try to kill any life that grows on them. Terrible storms, deadly radiation, and creatures that exist only to hunt and kill other creatures. A student near the front raised her hand. It was Nira, a Zephyrian whose people looked like tall, thin birds with colorful feathers. "Professor, what about Class X planets?" she asked. The classroom became very quiet. Even the soft humming sound that Crix's breathing machine made seemed to get quieter. Professor Thexan's expression grew dark. Class X planets are what we call death worlds. They are so dangerous that no intelligent life should be able to develop there. The gravity is crushing, the weather is deadly, and every living thing is trying to kill every other living thing. He paused and looked around the room. In all of our exploration of the galaxy, we have found only 3 planets that qualify as true death worlds. Each one did produce some form of intelligent life, but those species always destroyed themselves before they could reach the stars. Death worlds create creatures that are too violent and dangerous to build civilizations. Jake felt his stomach twist into a knot. He knew something that Professor Thexan did not know, something that would change everything. The professor continued his lecture, showing images of Class A and Class B worlds where different species had evolved. Beautiful forests, calm oceans, and gentle creatures that ate plants and lived in peace. It was like looking at paradise. "The key to understanding planetary classification," Professor Thexan said, "is to remember that peaceful worlds create peaceful species. Harsh worlds create hardy species. and violent worlds create violent species that cannot survive their own nature. When class ended, the students began to file out. Zara's crystal body chimed as she packed her materials. Crix's tentacles moved in smooth waves as he gathered his notes. The other humans chatted quietly about their homework assignments. Jake sat in his chair for a long moment, staring at the now empty display area. His mind was racing, but he tried to keep his thoughts calm. He knew that Professor Thexon might accidentally read his mind if his emotions got too strong. Finally, he stood up and walked toward the professor's desk. Professor Thexon was organizing his materials for the next class, his long fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Professor?" Jake said quietly. The Velkari looked up and smiled. "Yes, Jake? Did you have a question about today's lesson?" "I was wondering about the classification system," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What exactly makes a planet a death world?" Professor Thexon seemed pleased that Jake was showing interest in the subject. Most humans asked practical questions about things they could use in their careers. Pure academic curiosity was less common among them. "Well," the professor said, settling back in his chair, "there are several factors. First, gravity must be at least 1.2 times standard gravity. Most species cannot function properly under such crushing weight." Jake nodded, doing quick math in his head. Second, the atmosphere must be unstable. Pressure changes, temperature swings, and dangerous gases are all signs of a death world. Third, the radiation levels must be high enough to cause genetic damage to most forms of life. The professor was warming to his subject now, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. But the most important factor is the ecosystem itself. On a true death world, every creature must be able to kill and eat other creatures to survive. There are no pure plant eaters because plants themselves are dangerous. Predation is not just common, it is the only way to stay alive. Jake felt cold despite the warm classroom air. How would you know if a planet was really a death world? I mean, if someone wanted to hide that fact? Professor Thexon laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing. "Oh, that would be impossible, my young friend. No species from a death world could hide their true nature. The violence and aggression would be obvious in everything they do. They would be unable to cooperate with other species or build peaceful societies. But what if they learned to control those instincts?" Jake asked. "Impossible," the professor said firmly. Deathworld species are driven by survival instincts that cannot be overcome. They would see every other species as either prey or predator. The idea of different species working together in harmony, like we do here at the Academy, would be completely foreign to them. Jake thanked the professor and left the classroom, his mind spinning with implications. He walked slowly through the corridors of the Academy, past groups of students from a dozen different worlds, all laughing and learning together. He thought about his home planet, about the things he had never mentioned to his alien friends. The storms that could destroy entire cities, the animals that hunted humans for food, the long history of his species fighting wars against itself. Most of all, he thought about the careful way humans behaved around other species, always being polite and gentle and peaceful. He had always thought it was just good manners. Now he wondered if it was something else entirely. Jake could not sleep that night. He lay in his small dorm room staring at the ceiling while his roommate Danny snored peacefully in the bed across from him. The Academy's artificial day and night cycle was supposed to help students from different worlds adjust to a common schedule, but Jake's mind was too busy to rest. He kept thinking about Professor Thexon's lecture. Death worlds. Planets so dangerous that intelligent life could not survive there. Gravity that crushed bones. Weather that killed without warning. Creatures that existed only to hunt and kill. Jake thought about his childhood on Earth. He remembered camping trips with his father in the mountains of Colorado, where they had to hang their food in trees to keep bears from stealing it. Bears that could tear a human apart with their claws. His father had taught him to make noise while hiking so they would not surprise a mountain lion. Mountain lions that hunted humans for food. He remembered the tornado that had destroyed his neighbor's house when he was 12 years old. Winds so strong they could pick up cars and throw them like toys. His family had hidden in the basement, listening to the roar of destruction above them. He thought about the ocean where he had learned to swim. Beautiful blue water filled with sharks that could bite a person in half. Jellyfish whose sting could kill in minutes. Currents that could drag swimmers far from shore and leave them to drown. And those were just the things humans thought of as normal parts of nature. Jake rolled over and tried to sleep, but his mind would not stop working. By morning, he had made a decision. The next day, Jake waited outside Professor Thexan's office after classes ended. The hallway was busy with students heading to their evening activities. A group of Zentarian students walked by, their arms gesturing as they discussed some complex mathematical problem. Their homeworld was so peaceful that they had never invented weapons of any kind. When Professor Thexan arrived, he seemed surprised to see Jake waiting. Another question about planetary classification, the professor asked with a smile. Yes, sir, Jake said. I was hoping you could help me understand the exact requirements for each classification level. Professor Thexan's office was filled with specimens from worlds across the galaxy. Crystals that grew on tidally locked planets, flowers that bloomed only in binary star systems, and shells from creatures that lived in liquid methane oceans. Everything was beautiful and harmless. The professor settled behind his desk and activated a holographic display. Charts and numbers filled the air between them. What specifically would you like to know? Professor Thexan asked. Jake pulled out a small notebook. He had spent the morning writing down questions, trying to make them sound like academic curiosity, rather than personal concern. For gravity, Jake said, what exactly counts as crushing weight? Standard gravity is based on the average of all Class A homeworlds, the professor explained. Anything above 1.2 times standard is considered dangerous. At 1.3 times standard, most species begin to suffer bone density problems. At 1.5 times standard, cardiovascular systems start to fail. Jake wrote down the numbers, doing quick calculations in his head. Earth's gravity was 1.4 times the galactic standard. What about atmospheric pressure? Jake asked. Stable atmospheric pressure is crucial for most life forms, Professor Thexan said. Pressure changes of more than 10% can cause serious health problems. Anything above 15% variation is classified as unstable. Jake nodded, remembering airplane flights where his ears had popped from pressure changes. He thought about mountain climbing, where the air became so thin that climbers needed oxygen tanks. The pressure variation on Earth was much higher than 15%. Temperature ranges? Jake asked. Most species can tolerate temperature variations of about 20 degrees in their normal environment, the professor said. Class F hostile worlds might have variations of 30 degrees. Class G worlds can have swings of 40 degrees or more. Jake thought about the weather back home. Summer temperatures in Arizona that could reach 50 degrees Celsius. Winter temperatures in Alaska that dropped to negative 40 degrees. That was a 90-degree variation, and humans lived in both places. What about radiation? Jake asked, though he was starting to fear the answer. Background radiation on most civilized worlds is minimal, Professor Thexan explained. The magnetic fields and atmospheres of Class A planets protect inhabitants from harmful space radiation. Deathworlds typically have weak magnetic fields that allow deadly radiation to reach the surface. Jake remembered learning about Earth's ozone layer and how it protected the planet from ultraviolet radiation. But he also knew that people still got skin cancer from sun exposure, and that Earth's magnetic field sometimes fluctuated enough to disrupt electronics. Now, Professor Thexan said, leaning forward with interest, the most important factor is the ecosystem. Can you imagine a world where every plant and animal is actively trying to kill every other living thing? Jake tried to keep his expression neutral. What would that look like? Well, first you would have plants that are poisonous or dangerous to touch. On peaceful worlds, plants provide food and shelter. On death worlds, plants would be weapons. Jake thought about poison ivy, thorns on roses, trees that could cause severe allergic reactions. He thought about mushrooms that could kill with a single bite, and berries that looked delicious but were deadly poisonous. Then you would have predators, at every level of the ecosystem, the professor continued, not just large creatures that hunt for food. but tiny organisms that spread disease, insects that inject venom, and parasites that eat their hosts from the inside. Jake's stomach twisted as he thought about mosquitoes carrying malaria, ticks, spreading disease, and the countless microscopic organisms that could make humans sick or kill them. But the worst part, Professor Thexon said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, would be the apex predators. Creatures so perfectly designed for killing that they could hunt any other life form on the planet. They would be fast, strong, intelligent, and completely without mercy. The professor paused, looking at his collection of peaceful specimens. Thank goodness such creatures have never evolved, he said. Any species that developed on such a world would be monsters. They would be incapable of cooperation, diplomacy, or peaceful coexistence. They would see every other species as either food or competition to be eliminated. Jake sat quietly for a moment, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the previous day. Professor, have you ever heard of a planet called Earth? Professor Thexon accessed his database with a thought, his eyes briefly glowing as he interfaced with the Academy's computer system. Earth, he said slowly. Yes, that is the human homeworld. It is classified as a Class B planet suitable for carbon-based life with minor environmental challenges. Jake felt his heart racing. Who made that classification? The human delegation when they first made contact with the galactic community 50 years ago, the professor said. It was confirmed by our preliminary surveys. Why do you ask? Jake looked down at his notebook, filled with numbers and calculations. According to everything Professor Thexon had just explained, Earth met every single requirement for Class X Deathworld classification. In fact, it exceeded most of them. Professor, Jake said quietly, I think there might be an error in Earth's classification. Professor Thexon looked puzzled. What kind of error? Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. Based on the criteria you just gave me, Earth should be classified as a Class X Deathworld. The professor's expression shifted from puzzlement to polite disbelief. Jake, I think you may have misunderstood something about your own planet. Earth is clearly not a death world. Humans are peaceful, cooperative, and highly civilized. You work well with other species and show no signs of the violent aggression that would be expected from Deathworld inhabitants. But what if the classification was wrong from the beginning? Jake asked. Professor Thexon smiled kindly. My young friend, humans have been part of the galactic community for 50 years. We know your species well. You are gentle, curious, and adaptable. Nothing like the monsters that a true Deathworld would create. Jake closed his notebook and stood up. Professor, would you be willing to let me present evidence to support my theory? The professor looked amused. Evidence that your own homeworld is a Deathworld? Jake, I admire your scientific curiosity, but I think you are mistaken about the nature of Earth. Maybe, Jake said. But what if I am not? Professor Thexon considered this for a moment. Very well. If you can gather real evidence, I will arrange for you to present it to a small group of faculty and advanced students. But I warn you, the burden of proof will be quite high. Jake nodded. I understand, Professor. Thank you for the opportunity. As Jake left the office, Professor Thexon called after him. Jake, may I ask what prompted this unusual theory? Jake paused in the doorway. I just started wondering what would happen if a species from a Deathworld learned to hide their true nature. The professor laughed softly. Impossible, my friend. Such creatures could never learn restraint or cooperation. Their violent instincts would always betray them. Jake walked away without responding, but his mind was already working on his presentation. Jake spent the next 3 days gathering information about Earth. He contacted his family back home, asking innocent questions about their daily lives. He researched human history in the Academy's library. Most importantly, he found Lisa Chen in the engineering lab and asked for her help. Lisa was working on a project involving atmospheric processors when Jake approached her. She looked up from her calculations, pushing her long black hair away from her face. Jake, you look worried about something, she said. Lisa, I need your help with something strange, Jake said, sitting down beside her workbench. What do you know about Earth's environmental conditions compared to other planets? Lisa raised an eyebrow. That is a weird question. Why do you want to know? Jake explained about his conversation with Professor Thexan and his growing suspicion that Earth might be classified incorrectly. Lisa listened with increasing concern. You think Earth is a death world? She asked quietly. I think we need to find out, Jake said. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let me help you gather data. But Jake, if you are right about this, it could change everything for humans in the galaxy. I know, Jake said. That is why we need to be sure. They worked together for 2 days compiling information about Earth's environment, wildlife, and human history. Lisa used her engineering background to analyze the technical data, while Jake focused on biological and ecological information. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Earth's gravity was 1.4 times galactic standard. Its atmospheric pressure varied by more than 30% from sea level to mountaintops. Temperature ranges exceeded 90 degrees Celsius in areas where humans lived permanently. The planet's magnetic field fluctuated regularly, allowing dangerous radiation to reach the surface. But the ecosystem data was the most shocking part. Earth had more predator species per square kilometer than any planet in the galactic database. Large predators like bears, lions, sharks, and crocodiles that could kill humans with ease. Venomous creatures like snakes, spiders, and jellyfish that could kill with a single bite or sting. Microscopic predators like bacteria and viruses that caused disease and death. Even Earth's plants were dangerous. Poison ivy that caused painful rashes. Mushrooms that could kill with a single bite. Trees with thorns sharp enough to pierce human skin. Flowers that produce toxins capable of stopping a human heart. This is incredible, Lisa whispered as they reviewed their findings. How did our species survive long enough to develop intelligence? Maybe that is the wrong question, Jake said slowly. Maybe the question is, what kind of intelligence develops on a planet like this? The day of Jake's presentation arrived. Professor Thexan had arranged for a small gathering in one of the Academy's conference rooms. About 20 faculty members and advanced students were present, representing a dozen different species. Jake stood at the front of the room, feeling nervous as he looked out at the audience. Professor Thexan sat in the front row, looking supportive but skeptical. Lisa sat near the back, giving Jake an encouraging nod. In the audience were some of the Academy's most respected minds. Dr. Vextai, a Thorkin military historian whose people were considered the galaxy's greatest warriors. Commander Zith, a Aquarian who served as the Academy's security chief. Professor Yillara, a Silthan expert in comparative biology. Thank you all for coming, Jake began, his voice slightly shaky. I want to present evidence that Earth, the human homeworld, has been incorrectly classified as a Class B planet. I believe it should be reclassified as a Class X death world. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. Dr. Vextai leaned forward with interest. The Thorkins were one of the few species in the galaxy that understood warfare and violence, though even they came from a relatively peaceful world. Jake activated the holographic display and began with basic environmental data. The numbers spoke for themselves. Earth's gravity, atmospheric pressure, temperature ranges, and radiation levels all exceeded the requirements for death world classification. These are impressive statistics, Professor Thexan said during a pause. But environmental challenges alone do not make a death world. The ecosystem must be actively hostile to intelligent life. That brings me to my next section, Jake said. The display changed to show images of Earth's wildlife. Jake had carefully selected examples that would have the maximum impact on his alien audience. First came the great white shark, 20 feet long, weighing over 2 tons, with rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. The alien students gasped as Jake explained that these creatures actively hunted humans in Earth's oceans. Next was the polar bear, 8 feet tall when standing, strong enough to crush a human skull with one blow of its paw. Jake showed video footage of polar bears hunting. their incredible speed and power on full display. Then came the venomous creatures. Cobras that could kill with a single bite. Black widow spiders whose venom caused paralysis and death. Box jellyfish, whose sting could stop a human heart in minutes. The audience was becoming visibly uncomfortable. Crix, the Aquarian student, had turned a pale shade of purple. Zara's crystal body was chiming with distress frequencies. But these are just the large predators, Jake continued. Earth is also home to countless microscopic hunters. He showed images of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that cause disease in humans, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, plague-spreading fleas, parasitic worms that could live inside human bodies for years. Commander Zith raised a tentacle. How do humans survive in such an environment? Jake had been hoping someone would ask that question. That is where it gets interesting, he said. Humans survive because we are the most successful predators on Earth. The room fell completely silent. Jake changed the display to show human anatomy and physiology. He explained how human eyes were positioned on the front of their heads, like all predators, giving them excellent depth perception for hunting. He showed how human teeth included sharp canines designed for tearing meat. Humans are persistence hunters, Jake explained. We chase our prey over long distances until it collapses from exhaustion. No other species on Earth can run as far as humans can. Dr. Vextai spoke up, his deep voice filling the room. What about human cooperative behavior? Predators are typically solitary creatures. Humans are pack hunters, Jake replied. Like wolves, they work together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. This cooperation made them the dominant species on Earth. Lisa stood up from her seat in the back. May I add something? Jake nodded, and Lisa walked to the front of the room. I have been analyzing human physical capabilities compared to other species, she said. Humans can function with injuries that would incapacitate most galactic species. They can lose up to 40% of their blood and continue fighting. They can survive with broken bones, torn muscles, and internal injuries that would kill other beings. She paused, looking around the room. Human adrenaline response allows them to ignore pain and perform feats of strength that should be impossible, given their muscle mass. In extreme situations, humans have been known to lift objects weighing several times their own body weight. Professor Yil Ara, the Silthan biologist, made a sound like breaking crystal. This explains human adaptability. They evolved to survive in an environment where everything was trying to kill them. But wait, Professor Thexon said, standing up. If humans are truly from a Deathworld, if they are natural predators with such dangerous capabilities, how have they integrated so peacefully into galactic society? Deathworld species should be violent and aggressive. Jake looked at Lisa, then back at the audience. This was the most important part of his presentation. Maybe that is exactly why humans are so peaceful, he said quietly. When your entire evolution is based on survival. When your planet teaches you that violence leads to death, you learn the value of cooperation and restraint. He paused, letting that sink in. Humans learn to control their predator instincts because on a death world, the species that cannot control themselves go extinct. We are not peaceful despite being from a dangerous world. We are peaceful because we come from a dangerous world. The room erupted in discussion as faculty members and students began talking excitedly among themselves. Jake stood at the front, watching as everything he had said slowly changed how these beings saw humanity. Professor Thexon raised his hand for silence. Jake, if your theory is correct, it has profound implications for how we understand human behavior and capabilities. No, Jake said. That is why I wanted to present this evidence. I think it is time the galaxy knew the truth about Earth. Commander Zith stood up, his massive form towering over the other beings in the room. Young human, you have given us much to consider. This information must be shared with the Galactic Council immediately. As the meeting ended, and beings filed out of the room, Jake felt a mixture of relief and fear. He had revealed the truth, but he had no idea what the consequences would be for humanity's place in the galaxy. Word about Jake's presentation spread through the academy faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, every student and faculty member knew that a human had claimed Earth was actually a death world. The reaction was immediate and intense. Jake found himself at the center of attention wherever he went. Some students stared at him with new fear in their eyes. Others approached him with curious questions. A few seemed fascinated by the idea that they had been studying alongside creatures from the most dangerous type of planet in the galaxy. During breakfast in the academy cafeteria, Jake sat with Lisa and Danny, trying to eat, while beings from across the room watched them. Danny had learned about the presentation from other students and was not happy about the attention. "Jake, what have you done?" Danny whispered, glancing around nervously. "Everyone is looking at us like we are dangerous animals." "Maybe that is, because we are," Lisa said quietly, pushing her food around on her plate. "Do not say that," Danny replied. "We are not monsters. We are just normal people trying to get an education." Jake looked around the cafeteria. At a table near the windows, a group of Zentaurian students kept glancing in their direction and whispering among themselves. The Zentaurians were peaceful beings who had never developed weapons because their world had no predators. They looked genuinely frightened. At another table, Crick sat with his Aquarian friends, his tentacles moving in agitated patterns. The Aquarians were discussing something in their complex mathematical language, but Jake could tell from their body language that they were talking about humans. "This is what I was afraid of," Danny said. "Now everyone thinks we are killers." "We need to give people time to understand," Jake said. "The truth is scary, but it does not change who we are." Professor Thexon had not been idle since the presentation. He had immediately contacted xenobiology experts across the galaxy, sending them Jake's data and asking for their opinions. The responses had been unanimous and disturbing. Every expert who reviewed the information agreed that Earth met all the criteria for Class X Deathworld classification. Several noted that Earth actually exceeded the requirements significantly. One Velkari scientist called it the most hostile environment ever discovered to produce intelligent life. 3 days after Jake's presentation, Professor Thexon called him to his office. When Jake arrived, he found the professor looking tired and worried. "Jake, I have been reviewing your data with colleagues across the galaxy," Professor Thexon said. "I am afraid I owe you an apology. You were correct. Earth is undoubtedly a Class X death world." Jake sat down heavily in the chair across from the professor's desk. Even though he had expected this confirmation, hearing it still felt like a shock. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "The Galactic Council has been informed," Professor Thexon said. "They are demanding a complete review of Earth's planetary classification and humanity's status within the Galactic Alliance." The professor paused, looking at Jake with an expression that mixed respect and concern. "Jake, there is something else. The Council wants to understand how humans have managed to integrate so successfully into galactic society. They are particularly interested in human physical and mental capabilities." "What kind of capabilities?" Jake asked, though he suspected he knew where this was heading. "Combat abilities, pain tolerance, recovery rates, and psychological responses to stress," Professor Thexon said. "They want to conduct tests." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Tests on humans?" "Voluntary demonstrations," the professor said quickly. "No one wants to force anything, but the Council needs to understand what they are dealing with." That afternoon, Jake met with Lisa and Danny in one of the Academy's study rooms. He explained what Professor Thexon had told him about the Council's interest in testing human capabilities. "Absolutely not," Danny said immediately. "I am not going to be some kind of lab rat for alien scientists." "Danny, this might be important," Lisa said. "If the Council is going to make decisions about humanity's place in the galaxy, they should have accurate information." "Accurate information about what?" Danny asked. "About how well we can fight? About how much pain we can take? That sounds like they are deciding whether we are too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space." Jake had been thinking about the same thing. Maybe we should ask other humans what they think. Over the next few days, Jake, Lisa, and Danny spoke with every human student at the Academy. There were 37 humans total, studying everything from engineering to diplomacy to xenobiology. The reactions to Jake's discovery were mixed. Some humans, like Mike Turner from the engineering program, were proud that their species was special in some way. Finally, something that makes us stand out, he said. We are not just the boring average species anymore. Others, like Amy Roberts from the Diplomatic Corps, were worried about the political implications. If other species start seeing us as dangerous, it could destroy 50 years of peaceful relations, she said. But the most interesting reaction came from Captain Ben Harris, a human military advisor who worked with the Academy's security department. When Jake explained the situation to him, Captain Harris just nodded. I wondered when someone would figure it out. He said calmly. You knew? Jake asked. Not exactly, Captain Harris replied. But I always notice things. The way other species react to even minor injuries that humans shrug off. How they are amazed by human endurance during physical training. The way they look at us when we talk about Earth's wildlife. Captain Harris leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. Jake, I have been working with alien security forces for 10 years. I have seen Thorkin warriors, who are supposed to be the toughest species in the galaxy, struggle with training exercises that human children could complete. What are you saying? Lisa asked. I am saying that maybe it is time the galaxy understood what humans really are, Captain Harris said. We have been hiding our true capabilities for 50 years trying to fit in. Maybe that was a mistake. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the Academy's communication system. All students and faculty were requested to report to the main auditorium for an important message from the Galactic Council. The auditorium was packed when they arrived. Jake saw Professor Thexon sitting with the other faculty members in the front rows. Students from dozens of species filled the remaining seats, their conversations creating a low buzz of different languages and sounds. Commander Zith stood on the stage, his massive Aquarian form imposing even in the large space. Behind him, a holographic display showed the symbol of the Galactic Council. Students and faculty of the Galactic Academy, Commander Zith began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. We have received disturbing information regarding the planetary classification of Earth and the true nature of human beings. The room became quiet. Jake felt every eye in the auditorium turn toward the human students scattered throughout the crowd. After extensive review by xenobiology experts across the galaxy, Earth has been reclassified as a Class X Deathworld. This makes humanity the first known species from such a world to achieve space travel and peaceful integration with other civilizations. Murmurs of shock and fear rippled through the audience. Jake saw Zara's crystal body flickering with stress patterns. Near the front, a group of Zentorian students had moved closer together as if seeking protection. The Galactic Council requires additional information about human capabilities before making decisions about humanity's continued participation in interspecies programs, Commander Zith continued. We are requesting voluntary demonstrations from human students to help us understand the implications of this discovery. Captain Harris stood up from his seat. Commander, what kind of demonstrations? Physical endurance tests, pain tolerance, assessments, and combat simulations, Commander Zith replied. We need to understand how Deathworld evolution has affected human abilities. And if we refuse, asked Amy Roberts. Commander Zith's expression was unreadable. The Council hopes that will not be necessary. However, if humans are unwilling to cooperate, it may be difficult to maintain current diplomatic relations. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The message was clear. Demonstrate your capabilities or risk being excluded from galactic society entirely. After the assembly, the human students gathered in one of the common areas to discuss their options. The conversation was heated and emotional. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Danny said. Now they want to see if we are too dangerous to be trusted. Maybe we should just show them what they want to see, Mike Turner said. Prove that we can be trusted despite our origins. Or maybe we should show them exactly why they should be worried, Captain Harris said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it, he continued. For 50 years, humans have been trying to prove we are peaceful and harmless. But we have never shown them what we are really capable of. Maybe it is time they understood that our peaceful behavior is a choice, not a limitation. Jake looked around at his fellow humans, seeing the same realization dawning on their faces. They had spent their entire lives at the academy being careful, polite, and restrained. They had never pushed their physical limits or shown their true potential. Captain Harris is right, Jake said slowly. The demonstrations were scheduled for 3 days later in the academy's main gymnasium. Word had spread beyond the academy, and representatives from every major species in the Galactic Council had arrived to observe. The gymnasium had been converted into a testing facility with medical equipment, recording devices, and safety barriers. Jake stood with the other human volunteers in a preparation room adjacent to the gymnasium. 32 humans had agreed to participate in the demonstrations, including all the students and several human faculty members who had arrived from other institutions. Captain Harris had taken charge of organizing the demonstrations. He had divided the volunteers into groups based on their strengths and the types of tests the council had requested. Jake had been assigned to the endurance and recovery group along with Lisa and 6 other students. Remember, Captain Harris said as they prepared to enter the gymnasium, we are not trying to intimidate anyone. We are showing them who we really are. 50 years of hiding our true nature has led to this moment. Now they will understand that our peaceful behavior is a choice we make every day. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a human physician who had flown in from Earth specifically for these demonstrations, was checking each volunteer's medical status. She looked worried as she spoke with Captain Harris. Ben, some of these tests could be dangerous, she said quietly. The pain tolerance assessments in particular. I am not sure we should push the limits that far. Sarah, they need to understand, Captain Harris replied. If we hold back now, they will always wonder what we are hiding. The gymnasium doors opened and the humans filed out to face an audience that included some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Jake saw Professor Theksan sitting with the academy faculty, his expression nervous but supportive. In the VIP section, members of the Galactic Council watched with intense interest. Commander Vexmol, a Thorkin Council member, stood to address the gathering. The Thorkins were considered the galaxy's warrior species, though their homeworld was far more peaceful than Earth. We are here to observe voluntary demonstrations of human physical and mental capabilities, Commander Vexmol announced. These tests will help the Council understand the implications of humanity's Deathworld origins. The first demonstration was physical endurance. Jake and 5 other humans were asked to run on treadmills, while alien observers monitored their vital signs. The aliens had calculated that based on average galactic physiology, the test subjects should reach exhaustion after about 20 minutes of moderate running. Jake started at what felt like a comfortable jogging pace. Around him, the other humans looked relaxed and confident. In the observation area, alien scientists watched their monitoring equipment with growing amazement. After 20 minutes, the humans were still running easily. After 40 minutes, they had barely broken a sweat. The alien observers began murmuring, among themselves checking and rechecking their equipment. At the 1-hour mark, Dr. Yilthara, a Siltan physiologist, called for the test to stop. This is impossible, she said, her crystal body flickering with confusion. Their heart rates and breathing patterns indicate they could continue for several more hours. The next test was pain tolerance. Dr. Mitchell had strongly opposed this demonstration, but the council had insisted. The test involved applying controlled electrical stimulation to volunteers while measuring their responses. Mike Turner volunteered to go first. As the electrical current increased, alien observers waited for him to signal when the pain became unbearable. The current reached levels that would have incapacitated most galactic species, but Mike continued to stand calmly, barely showing any reaction. Stop the test, Dr. Mitchell called out, her voice filled with concern. I am fine, Doctor, Mike said. I can continue. The alien observers looked at each other in shock. Commander Vexmol leaned forward in his seat, his warrior instincts clearly engaged. The third demonstration was recovery capability. Lisa volunteered to have a small cut made on her arm, while alien medical experts observed the healing process. What they saw defied their understanding of biology. Within minutes, the bleeding had stopped. Within an hour, the wound had begun to close. Dr. Yilthara ran additional scans, her equipment humming as it analyzed Lisa's cellular activity. The healing rate is approximately 5 times faster than any known species, she announced to the gathering. Her immune system is actively fighting infection while simultaneously rebuilding damaged tissue. But it was the final demonstration that truly shocked the galactic observers. Captain Harris had saved the combat simulation for last, knowing it would have the greatest impact. The simulation involved a holographic training scenario used by Thorkin military academies. It was designed to test tactical thinking and combat reflexes against multiple opponents. Most Thorkin cadets required months of training to complete the basic level. Danny Williams volunteered for this demonstration, despite having no formal military training. He was an engineering student who had never considered himself particularly athletic or aggressive. The simulation began with Danny facing 3 holographic opponents in a confined space. The aliens in the observation area expected him to struggle, perhaps learning the scenario through trial and error like most species did. Instead, Danny moved with fluid precision that stunned the observers. He analyzed the tactical situation in seconds, identified the optimal strategy, and executed a series of movements that neutralized all 3 opponents in under 30 seconds. "Run level 2, Commander Vexamol called out, his voice tight with disbelief. Level 2 involved 6 opponents with ranged weapons. Danny completed it in 45 seconds. Level 3 had 10 opponents and environmental hazards. Danny finished in just over a minute. The gymnasium had fallen completely silent. Commander Vexmol stood up, his massive frame trembling slightly. "That scenario is designed for elite Thorkin special forces," he said quietly. "Most of our warriors cannot complete level 3 even after years of training." Captain Harris stepped forward. "Commander, Danny is not a warrior. He is an engineering student. Among humans, his performance would be considered average." The statement sent shockwaves through the alien observers. If an average human could outperform elite alien warriors, what were trained human soldiers capable of? Dr. Thexon rose from his seat among the faculty. "Captain Harris, how is this possible? How did humans develop such capabilities while maintaining peaceful civilizations?" Captain Harris looked around the gymnasium, making eye contact with alien observers throughout the room. "Because on Earth these capabilities are not special," he said. "They are basic survival skills. Every human child learns to endure pain, to heal quickly, and to think tactically under pressure. Not because we want to be warriors, but because anything less means death." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We learned cooperation and restraint because on a death world, species that cannot control their aggressive instincts become extinct. We are peaceful not despite our dangerous origins, but because of them." Lisa stepped forward to join Captain Harris. "Every human in this room could perform similar demonstrations. We have been restraining ourselves for 50 years trying to fit in with species from peaceful worlds. But this is who we really are." Jake found himself walking forward as well, followed by the other human volunteers. They stood together facing the alien observers, no longer hiding their true nature. Commander Vexmal looked at the humans with a mixture of respect and fear. "What do you want from the Galactic Council?" "Nothing different than what we have always wanted," Jake said, surprised to hear his own voice speaking to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "To be part of the galactic community, to learn and share knowledge, to build peaceful relationships with other species. But now you know the truth about us," Captain Harris added. "We are the children of a death world. We are stronger, faster, and more dangerous than any other species in known space. We could dominate this galaxy if we chose to." The alien observers shifted nervously in their seats. "But we do not choose to," Captain Harris continued. "We choose cooperation over conquest. We choose diplomacy over warfare. We choose to protect rather than predicate. That choice is what makes us human." Commander Vexmal was quiet for a long moment, then slowly stood and began to applaud. One by one, other alien observers joined him until the entire gymnasium was filled with the sound of appreciation from dozens of different species. Professor Thexan approached Jake after the formal proceedings had ended. "Jake, I owe you more than an apology. You have helped us understand that strength without wisdom is meaningless, but wisdom combined with strength can change the galaxy." 3 months later, Jake stood in the same classroom where his discovery had begun, but now he wore the robes of a professor of survival sciences. The Galactic Council had created an entirely new field of study based on human knowledge of Deathworld survival. His students today included young beings from across the galaxy, all eager to learn from humanity's unique perspective. As Jake looked out at their faces, he realized that fear had been replaced by respect and curiosity. Today we will discuss the most important lesson my species ever learned. Jake began his lecture. Survival is not about being the strongest or the most dangerous.